Gifted last. Only that sound you opens my fontaine and shakes a fear. Rain falling like a man, rain falling like a woman. Like a drum, on top of my head, a heartbeat lapping at the edge of you. Where you go, I want to follow, but those sounds you make, all breath and answers, look like a perch for my questions. And holding my breath in the rain like that. Leaning into the forest of you makes me forget I've got arms, branches, tongues, teeth, pistons, wheels, legs, 3 hearts. Did you know everything has a skin, even the universe has a skin, even your small sounds, even your love has a skin. Like each cell, the space inside is vast, and it has its own sound, its own roots. Inside a universe, the body plays its part, like me humming into you. Your love
youth was glass, pip of my heart, threaded on gut and vein for all to see. Dark currents bore me west, then south. On boom and shatter, a wall of grey sheen, I wriggled through and dropped into my life. Bird pipe, flax rattle, mud suck, green leaf spinning on water. Suspended in my simple pond, I lived my 100 years, forgetful of the sea beyond the bar, knowing only dimple of rain, soft blur of star, growing thick as your leg on shreds torn from dead sheep, snapping at flies but never taking profit bait. I have lived as you have lived, cautiously. But now I am old, and the sea knocks at my head, and there's a taste to the water that was not there before. I cannot eat, cannot settle. Guts shrunk to dry rattle. I turn into the current, swim with the stream. My eyes see more clearly now than they have ever seen. They have become rimmed with blue, so that I may see more clearly in the dark that lies ahead. My brow has flattened, so that I may move without impediment through the dark that lies ahead. My belly is heavy, thrilled with eggs, 20 million strung on velvet. I am become lean and full of purpose. I cross the bar on a moonless night, skin scraped, blood raw on sharp shingle, drop back into the dark, into the ocean where everything moves faster and the lights confuse. I find my path, my body freighted with millions. I am heavy with the future. I bear it along the dark path, through forests of kelp and booming cavern, following the taste in the water and stars marking left and right. I swim north, then east, one undulating muscle, one blunt head barking at the moon. I swim to the place where it is right to burst. I heave and writhe, torn flesh, egg dances to sperm. The water glitters like broken glass. And now that's done. I drift upon the surface, empty. Old band, skin for gulls. Old band. Tara by Kathleen Gallagher. Rivers weep, sweet willows, hanging green, falling leaves, wet black bark, sun low, touching closer our lives, rain falling, Tara, red sun, black bark, white frost, steaming. She climbs, Tara, a flat rope to the sky, her hair falling black to the earth. She climbs, above the faces grimacing pukana to the storm, above the hands shimmering winning the sun, above the feet throbbing haka the earth. She climbs, Tara, a flax rope to the sky. She grows heavy. Leave work, leave work. No pregnant women, no pregnant women here. She leaves. Stones whistle under shoes running, running. Late to trains, running. Late to work, running, running, running. She's gone. Between the doors and the 5-day faces. Between the gins and the man who pinches her. Between the high heels and the grey penguins flapping. She's gone. A shark. It was a shark. Legless, she rides the waves to sand, bleeding. They take her, they bandage her. The shark rides the waves, forgetting the stump worn brown. She climbs. Below her, the water turns. Winter sun green, etching the rocks as they grow huge at night and haunt the people of the ocean, beaches lying among the sand, where the ocean comes at night, hiding, haunting her steps, her hands, her heart. They come for her. They come for her. But she sits, eating fish and chips, watching the moon. The moon. The dawn breaking. Shattered hand, reaching for the hose, for the bread, the funny, breathing, sleeping inside the funny, the tide turning before the first light, the people rising, bathing, the people eating, drinking. The rope cutting her hair. fish, swimming, floundering in the nets, dragging, tugging, falling, drowning. Grab her, hit her, breathe her. Bring in the nets, toi yamai, drag in the nets. Ki te irunga, she comes, ki te takarotana, I takarotana. Lighting the waves, spearing the flax into flames, flaming the great round earth.
Before the tsunami on the 26th of December 2004 hit the Indian Ocean, killing hundreds of thousands of people, the sea gypsies observed that the sea had begun to recede in a strange way, and this drawing back was followed by an unusually small wave. They saw ahi, dolphins, swim quickly to deeper water, while elephants stampeded to higher ground. They heard the cicadas fall silent. The sea gypsies began telling each other their ancient story about the wave that eats people. They said it had come again. Some of the sea gypsies followed the elephants inland from the shore, moving to higher ground. Those at sea went out. They followed the dolphins, their ahe, into the very deep water. All of the sea gypsies survived. They put all of these unusual events together and they saw the whole using an exceptionally wide-angle lens. Burmese boatmen were also at sea when these preternatural events were occurring, but they did not survive. A sea gypsy was asked how it was that the Burmese, who also knew the sea, all perished. He replied, they were looking at squid. They were not looking at anything. They saw nothing. They looked at nothing. They don't know how to look. Whakarongo ki te taea. Whakarongo ki te aihe. Whakarongo ki te mako. Whakarongo ki te ngāhere. Ngā Thompson of the Hukalea. He says, navigation is about understanding and watching nature. Learning the many faces of the ocean, sensing subtle clues, the slight differences in swell, in the colour of water, in the shape of clouds, and in the movement of tāwhiri mātia, the wind. Whakarongo ki te taea, whakarongo ki te aihe, whakarongo ki te mako, whakarongo ki te ngāhere. Prior to the 1931 Napier earthquake, the local tohunga, who was watching the ocean, saw a mako, a white shark, swimming right in the Napier waterfront area. The tohunga put out an alert to all of the iwi and all the folk he knew in the area, and suggested they head to a marae far south of Napier so they would be safe. No Māori people perished in the Napier earthquakes in 1921. te aihe. Whakarongo ki te maku. Whakarongo ki te ngāhe. A Qigong master is sitting, meditating in Ututai through a severe earthquake. His body is waving like a willow waves in the wind. The earth, she insists, all of us become alert. We interact with her quaking, with the lights dancing, the birds singing, the trees growing, our earth waking. We listen with every inch, every pore of our being. Whakarongo ki te tae. Whakarongo ki te kahi. Whakarongo ki te maku. Whakarongo ki te ngāhi.
In another 10 to 15 minutes, we hope to be sharing with you a beautiful film that's been created by Catholic Canada. So now's the time for you to walk about, connect with us, and see the beautiful artwork from the exhibition that's been here for the last month on the walls. And we'll gather together again in 10 to 15 minutes or those after the film. Thank you for travelling the journey with us. Kia ora. Thank you.
Curating this evening for us to actually enjoy. Kia ora, Lisa.
you'll be able to hear more of our ensemble. And in fact, the music itself is going to be released as an album in the middle of the year, around Matariki time, and we'll be at the Great Hall. So it'll be lovely to see you there if you can make it. And I think at this point we get to say good night, Mahina. Thank you for making it out with us.
Enjoy the film. I have seen it.
So we'll get started. We may need to do a little tweaking along the way in terms of the sound, but bear with us. And it's really nice to be in a large space instead of like at home on my computer watching things. So I hope you're enjoying yourselves here in this beautiful space and with good company. So, kia ora, thank you. Thank you, Nikki. Mary.
Plants that grew in there. And Makatu was famous for its flax and for its mud. There were kahikatea trees there. The Kaituna was surrounded by wetland, so there were eels everywhere. They'd also get birds, and they were not only birds, but there were a lot of plants that grew in there. And Makatu was famous for its flax and for its mud. There were kahikatea trees everywhere. If Makatu wasn't here, a lot of people starved. If you take the First World War and the Second World War, there was no food around. There was no money, no food. So all the Te Aroha people used to come from as far as Taupo, if there were any there, Putaruru, all from inland, come to Makatu and get as much shellfish as they can, mussels, pawas, kina, and good fishing. Mena, ka ora te ngāhere, ka ora ngā manu. Mena, ka ora ngā manu, ka ora te tangata. So, if your forest is healthy, your bird life is healthy. And if your bird life is healthy, then we are healthy.
All you need is one or two people with the determination to get it moving.
The first one we worked on was called Whakapau Kōrero. Whakapau Kōrero is the last remaining piece of that 30,000 acres at Makatu. We got an action group together and worked out a strategy. There were willow trees in there, pampas, it was just a mess. It was a total mess. And you can walk in there today and it's beautiful. There are ponds in there, beautiful ponds full of bird life. It's completely, you wouldn't recognize it as being the same place that was there a couple of years ago. I was brought up by my grandparents, my grandfather and grandmother, and this was their life. And then it disappeared, it was taken from them, ripped away from them. No matter how hard they fought, the government wouldn't listen, no. So they died broken-hearted, that this was all destroyed and taken. And I'll never forget the day where we stood over there and we waited for the tide to come in. And that was the first day it flooded. The tide came in and it just worked its way right through out here and just flooded. And you looked out there and you saw all that water in there. It was a beautiful sight. The project we were looking at was to bring eelgrass back into the estuary. It's all disappeared. It stabilises the sand, the bottom, keeps it quite firm, and a lot of little fish sit inside the eelgrass. They grow about that long. Yeah. So you got all these little fish, and you can feel when you walk on them, it's very sturdy, and it's a habitat for all kinds of marine life. So very necessary to get them back. We've had some scientists come down, marine scientists, and the idea they've come up with is transplanting the eelgrass from one area, bring it down and transplant it.
Just weaving itself is a healing. Rhythm that you get into when you're weaving restores a rhythm within yourself. And when you can make something beautiful, that in actual fact helps you to see the beauty in yourself.
I'm fascinated by the way that our tupuna knew animal behaviour, understood seasonal patterns, knew their plants and everything around them so well that they knew that would bend that way and that could be tied that way, and if you let it dry a bit longer the knot won't break. Those kinds of things, little things, but when you put them all together you actually realise how amazing that was.
Every single plant had a use. They lived off the environment. When you can no longer provide a kai for your manuhiri, that's when you lose mana. And when you lose mana, your health goes downhill. See, mauri is basically the gift of life that's within a place. It enables life to thrive. When you actually drain your wetlands and destroy all the plants and drive away the birds, that mauri which sustains life fades away.
Whangamarino wetland is one of New Zealand's largest swamp and bog wetland systems in the North Island. It's in the Waikato River Basin. So 7,000 hectares.
The Whangamarino is not one big peat dome, it's three separate ones. And it got its Ramsar classification because of the diversity of its biodiversity. There's just so much margin land here and so much happening here that it's a very, very important place for us.
When you're travelling from the edge of the road, you might just see a whole lot of invasive willow trees. When you actually get into the middle of Whangamarino, it is really amazing and really unique, with a lot of rare and highly threatened species, both plants and animals, living in the raised bog wetland.
When I was a child, you could stand waist deep in the water and see your feet. You can't stand ankle deep in the water and see your feet. That's heavily silt laden and you just can't see in it. At a personal level, through coming from family of duck shooters and game bird hunters, probably the last 60 odd years I've been in and out of this wetland. So yeah, over the years I've seen a few changes. Not for the better.
I like to think of myself as a person who's really, really good at putting pictures in my head when I see spaces. I used to be able to come to spaces like this and just close my eyes and imagine what those spaces look like. I have to admit, I'm actually feeling a bit bummed out, and I feel a little bit like my picture has been, it's gone out of focus a wee bit, because what I'm looking at is I'm looking at willows everywhere. I'm looking at the water table has dropped so low. This place is surrounded with wasps. And we've got invasive plants everywhere that just make it impossible for our fish and that to be able to spawn.
A lot of our native fish that are only found in New Zealand, found nowhere else in the world, they don't have scales. So to get into amongst some of the plants to lay their eggs, the exotic plants are quite rough on the bottom edges, and they just will not spawn there.
We've got birds in major decline, and we've got big sediment loads coming down through the stream. So it takes a lot of work to hold on to that vision.
but this is probably as dry as I've ever seen these wetlands. Some of the ponds that are dry now I have never ever seen dry. For this time of the year, it's catastrophic.
Sort of on average 20,000 tonnes a year of sediment is coming into Whangamarino, and that's a really high amount. We think it's about 10 times more than natural.
So like we look at a system like Whangamarino, which used to be way bigger, and we think about the Waikato region as a whole, which had bigger expanses of wetlands right across the whole region. Those things have gone, and so the kete are breaking.
When you've got intensive horticulture, lots of orchards and dairy farms and other sorts of farms, piggeries and things like this, is a lot of waste. Wetlands, if there's enough of them, will actually turn that waste into something good to actually sustain life.
Wetlands I always thought were just a bit of rubbish, and I don't mind saying that, but now I realise after studying them and all and looking at them, is that they're one of the most sensitive ecosystems in the world. When I went to Keith Thompson and Bev Clarkson, and we looked at this, what we needed to do, and I showed them a picture of where it was, and we designed the wetland that we needed. We've got roughly a fifth of the farm is tied up in wetlands. This was a part of the Whangamarino wetland that we actually had to clear. So we actually used diggers and we used chains and ropes to pull all the grey willows out, and so it's got holes in it, and some of it's quite deep. You wouldn't want to go for a walk through it, you get stuck in it, but it's actually a really good environment. You see, I've come down here and seen swans and ducks and all the bird life. It'll be really brown in this part, but by the time it goes out, it's still really clean. It's stripped all the phosphorus out, it's stripped all the nitrogen out, and it's stripped all the sediment out. That's a good sign that a wetland is working properly how it's supposed to. It's actually quite good to come home, get out of the rat race and go for a walk and think it, get your brain sort of clear.
See, if you come to a wetland, you'll start to hear and see things that you actually have forgotten about. I mean, how many people have heard the wind rustling through the raupo and how all the leaves shiver and they make a sort of a lovely, lovely, lovely sound. The birds calling to each other. All of those things are actually healing because they actually bring peace within ourselves.
Our reo is really strongly influenced by the sounds around us, and these were the spaces that would have added to that tapestry of sounds that were able to then influence the way that we communicated. And they are places of significance for some iwi and hapu in terms of storage of their taonga. So these were safe holds. They have a lot of narrative, especially a lot across this landscape of the mamai some of the people went through, particularly with the invasions that led to the Raupatu in the 1860s. As these things start disappearing from the landscape, as our people pass away and those stories start to get lost, as those connections start to get a little bit broken as well. It's not to mean that we can't fix them. They're on the landscape. The tupuna left the names. They left us hints about the species. We've just got to now make an extra effort and extra time to go in there and find out and weave it all back together.
The traditional lands hitherto and far that once belonged or once formed the great estates of the Apakura people. Lost in the 1865 taking of lands, 1.2 million acres by the Crown, and yet here we are today still seeking reparation, but participating and ensuring that in some way, in some form, the echoes of their voices and footsteps on the land are being heard again, and that you're walking in those very same footsteps.
We're one of the voices of those wetlands. The National Wetland Trust was formed in 1999, so it's been here for just over 20 years. For a long time, farmers and land users have encroached on those wetlands and diminished their values.
They do so much for us, and people have actually calculated the dollar value of what wetlands do, and acre for acre or hectare for hectare, it's an order of magnitude higher than any other ecosystem type. They trap sediments coming off the land to keep the rivers cleaner and the sea cleaner. They store water during floods and then slowly release it so they absorb it, water up like a sponge. Bogs, the peatlands in New Zealand, the healthy ones, are actually year-round carbon sinks. So they're a net greenhouse gas sink, and they're putting it permanently underground. So we have a lot of focus on planting trees because trees store carbon, but only temporarily. It might be a few hundred years. The bogs put it back there forever.
The Trust is made up of some great, passionate people, great, passionate scientists. Its objective is to get Kiwis into wetlands, New Zealand's really special places.
This would have been quite an extensive peat bog around this little lake, but in more recent times it was farmed right to the lake edge. So we're turning the clock back on that and bringing those peat bog plants back in, and those are the ones that build up sort of like compost. It keeps building up and creates these lovely peat domes. One of the plants that does that is the giant cane rush, Sporodanthus, and inside the rush, inside the stem of the rush, is a little tiny skinny little caterpillar, the world's skinniest caterpillar. We call him Fred the Thread, that lives in there and eventually kind of chews a hole and emerges as this beautiful moth, and they're only in about 4 places in the world naturally, and we've brought them back to this lake.
Kia kotahi ai te whakaro, kia whaia kia marama ai, ka hore e kōrera no he kōrero, ka hua mai. Ko tērā anō, ngā kōrero kua hua mai, ngā whakaro kua whārikihia, koutou kua tai mai, ko tērā anō, te mea hei whakarangatira, tō tātou nei marae e tuaki nei, e mihi atu nei kia koutou. Huri no tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou.
Ko te ohaki, te atawhai.
Her and a couple of other aunties were riding their bikes and they could hear this horrific noise. And as they got closer, it was the eels. They were doing their run.
Tōna heke.
Yeah, across from Te Hakere, making their way to the Oho River. But you know, I mean, that was a regular thing happening back in their day, and we don't see that any longer. So you know, hence the revitalisation for Te Hakere. Yeah. So
we went on a journey here to Kore here to go back on that learning curve, and that's when a lot of us realised that what was happening. You know, we had farmers turning wetlands into pasture land, and the concept to our old people was, of course, of money, not worrying about the health and well-being of Papatūānuku. So through a lot of kōrero, Susie, with the rongoa and learning about that, of course it took us to the whenua and the waterways, which brought us back into what was happening in our own little area, farmers turning wetlands, which are the kidneys. So if you don't have kidneys in your body, you could imagine what happens to Papatūānuku.
It was a wetland that was in need of help. And that's really when we started having, based on the strength of the elders, that's when we really started having the strong conversations with the farming board, talking and appealing to them to say, look, we need to do something about the wetland. We were a hapu that just acted and learnt as we acted, because we knew that we had problems that need to be sorted, and it was no point waiting for others to catch up with us, so we just had to go ahead and do things.
Most of it was like collecting data, counting shells, the shellfish down at the beach, and yeah, coming out and planting, doing little plantations and all that, like yeah, just getting involved really. But yeah, that was years ago, back when we were kids.
If you're going to restore the mauri of the land, you actually have to allow it to be the best it can be. And this land was continually telling the farmers here that it just wanted to be swamp.
When I was farming, I can remember this place here was just a paddock of grass and swamp, and we were trying to put cows in here trying to farm it, and it was crazy. The seawater would come in here, and that would be a natural process for this land, and we were trying to stop it. We were blocking the stream, and we were, trying to hold this land from going back to what it used to be, and it was all wrong. And so I'm just glad that we've got something special now, and it's amazing, and I'm just so glad that I'm here looking after this place.
This looked like a drained cow paddock 18 years ago. So you look around this whole space, it was one big kind of puggy, messy, smelly, nasty, big puddle, kind of got wet in winter, dry in summer, grazed by cows, poop, wee, the whole bit. Now look at it.
We're starting to get tui in our little small blocks of bush that are establishing. So the birds are actually coming, and the native birds are the ones that I look for, and the little silver eyes, they're everywhere. You just notice the difference, a few years ago you didn't see them.
But there's about 5 basic species that can actually get you going. And then as the years progress, then you start adding the bigger things. Kahikatea.
You use a sharp spade and you just slice off the little plants, the little pups. Yep. You just keep slicing them off, and you end up with just a small root, and maybe 10 leaves on one root. Yep. And you just trim the heads off and leave a couple of pointers in the middle, bang them in, and away they go. They're so easy to plant, and they just, all our aunties and that, they used to plant all their little kitties, and they'd make mats.
One of the best things that happened at the Hakari was, we cleared that whole swamp and the lake. We were actually having birds come back and our eel numbers increased. And then the next thing that happens is that our swampland is covered in noxious weed.
Hornwort? Yeah, it's actually decimated all the fish life.
It's out light, it deoxygenates water, it makes it very hard to know.
That's it there. That's the devil.
Well, that's a real pain in the butt.
It chokes everything out, and it sucks all the oxygen out of the water. So your fish life of all
Smothers
everything.
Smothers everything.
Normally that's full of eel, tuna. And now, because of all these different diseases and, chemicals that we've put into the land, it's destroyed all that.
Our swamps, our lakes all feed each other, and they all follow along this coastline. If there is an effect on one, it does have an effect on the others because they're so interlinked.
You just need to look at Porirua Harbour now, which is just full of sediment from all the catchments around the whole of the harbour. Still happening. Shouldn't happen. This is the 21st century, isn't it? There should be no more loss of any biodiversity in New Zealand because we've lost so much. There's giant kokopu in there that are sort of like from my fingers to my elbow long, and they live in the big pools. There's banded kokopu, there's short and longfin eel, there's red bullies, blue gill bullies, giant bullies, all these different native fish. There's records of bittern in the swamp, and marsh and swamp crake. They're all very shy birds, and when it's a flax flowering season, it's a river of red. It's phenomenal. People of Pukerua Bay and Plumerton at each end love it a lot. A few years ago, the Friends of Taupo Swamp and its catchment was formed, and so there's a bunch of people that, you know, work really hard to enhance and protect this wetland. The Porirua City Council are doing a district plan change to allow the subdivision, and as soon as you get development happening, like which is going to happen on those hills over there, by developing the land and clearing the land, you get a lot of sediment acceleration happening. As climate change is affecting our weather patterns, we're getting bigger and bigger events of high rainfall. So when you're doing earthworks, what they do is they put sediment ponds in to catch the sediment, but they don't really work very well. They're lucky if they catch 30%. It's a very sad thought that the swamp is going to become a dry scrubland in time. There's been a lot of submissions. Over 90% of them are against it because of the impact that it's going to have. Every little square metre of wetland left is precious.
Mōwhitu was renowned for its abundance of tuna. This species that fed us for generations, fed our tupuna over centuries, is now crying out like a voice from the dust. And that's how I see it. So they're calling out to us, crying out to us, hey, we fed you over these years, over many years. Now it's your turn to look after us. Through this collaboration of iwi, of DOC and Cawthron, we can enhance the population of tuna once again through recruitment, through the wetland system, through filtering, through replanting our natives.
We've worked side by side over that whole 9 years in terms of getting more plants into the ground, restoring it back to its former state as a wetland. And this is a project now which is sort of gathering a bit of momentum. If you're looking ahead 50 years' time, we're hoping that there'll be very few exotic grasses through here. The margins will be shrubs that are all locally sourced seed. There'll be expanses of water. There'll be more of a thriving, complete environment as it would have been back in the days before it was drained.
Just been part of the planting for about 4 years now. Twice a year, come out and represent my whānau and reconnect with the whenua. Love doing this mahi. So tikoka and harakeke. So they're the ones that I've noticed survive the best. We've had other species that just get choked out by the kikuya. It's great when we've got a good team. The energy and the vibe, it's more enjoyable, and we move along pretty quick.
We celebrate because it's going to bring an abundance in wildlife to a sacred place. Years ago, our great-granddad, great-great-grandfather helped move some bones, human remains, to a safer place up higher on the mountain. And so, in honour of those people who lived here previous, who were our relatives, this is a great start to a future where we can bring the rising generations back, and hopefully they'll learn to appreciate our legacies and our rich histories in the same way my generation is beginning to.
For Ngāti Koata, they have a rich history, they have a deep history. Ngāti Kuia, as deep as the sediment under the lake. And it's that history that we're looking to uncover also through both our scientific tools and whakapapa. And it's our aim to, learn of our past as we dig deeper into the sediment, into the soil, and we reclaim our past histories and those stories and the pūrākau that go with it.
Going back to sort of pre-human times, this area was all a big lake and wetland complex that's been sort of impounded by these dunes, and the water level was a lot higher and the vegetation was really different. So the lowland sort of kakatea dominated potocarp, and here was really tall. The water levels was different, so accounts were saying it was metres higher than it is now.
What we're trying to do here is to restore the water levels, the hydrology of this wetland, and with that, a lot of the indigenous life within it will actually come back. There's been an earth dam or an earth barrier we've restored so far, and that's raised up the water levels by around 30 centimetres so far. So even with that 30 centimetre increase in water level, as we're seeing here, and it's deeper out behind me, you're seeing a lot of invertebrate life coming back already, and a lot of plants restoring as well. The lessons we have been learning from this wetland in terms of restoring hydrology and taking away the effects of drainage, we can apply to other wetlands. Wetlands in New Zealand are fairly degraded, and we've had 90% of our wetlands have been lost over the last couple of 100 years. A national wetland restoration program called Rohe Kooreporepo, involving 5 large and nationally significant wetland sites in New Zealand. So 30,000 hectares of the Rohe Kooreporepo program is actually a significant amount of the wetlands that are left remaining in New Zealand. Wetlands are incredibly important in the global climate cycle, in terms for carbon storage and as carbon sinks. A number of our sites, they're all facing significant issues with high levels of nitrogen or phosphorus or sediment loads that are going into them. But we've had a lot of wins in Rohe Kooreporepo over the last 10 years, so we are making some improvements.
Te Hoereri awa, one of the tipona awa of Ngāti Kuia, flows out of the natural vegetation of the Mount Richmond Forest Park and makes its way down to the Havelock Estuary. You can see if you look out over this awa at the moment, just how crystal clear it is. You know, there's beautiful colours and you can see how translucent it is. And this is what good looks like. And if we were to step in amongst the ngahere, the forest in behind us here, we will see, you know, how that it's been managed in terms of predator control traps and even wasp control bait stations and possum control stations. And it relies on a lot of volunteer labour. There's huge groups of volunteers that come here and manage and monitor the trap lines. But through that, we're looking at expanding this trapping network so we can reintroduce things like the whio, the native blue duck, into this catchment. So Ngāti Kuia have undertaken cultural health monitoring of this awa, and this is one of their sites for cultural health monitoring, and that's it's a sensory monitoring process. So it's looking, it's seeing, it's smelling, it's tasting, and it's that gut feeling about how this place looks and feels as a healthy environment. This is one of their sites. There is another site just across the road further where the Rye flows and meets this awa, and you'll see a different water quality. It's that visible. So we're identifying areas of wetlands and riparian riverways that need restoration or enhancements, how we can help farmers put fences in. Been working with the likes of Fonterra, Landcare Trust, forestry associations, how we can help foresters and others restore wetland areas. All of the downstream effects culminate in this estuary. Plumes of sedimentation flow out through the inlet when you've had heavy rain events. It is one of the heaviest sedimentated estuaries in the country. It's ambitious and we can't do it alone, and we have to work together. It's an opportunity for us to walk hand in hand and look at Western science, but also look at Mātauranga Māori as that wakahaurua, those two two hulls carving the same pathway together.
Ocarina Lagoon, in terms of its position in New Zealand, is known as New Zealand's largest unmodified wetland. It covers around 3,000 hectares of open water and probably another 1,000 to 1,500 hectares of wetlands.
The Ocarina wetlands have one inlet and outlet to the sea, to the Tasman Sea. And that inlet outlet varies, it moves, again, just like the people coming and going. The mouth of the lagoon seems to traverse up and down the coast.
In contrast to many other silts around New Zealand, and normally in an estuarine situation you would be walking in ankle-deep or knee-deep mud. Here it's quite firm. Sometimes it'll be like it is now, which is ideal for birds. They can access the mudflats, and then at other times there may be a metre deep of water where we're standing, so the birds have to move away. It makes it also unstable for the vegetation, so it's quite a dynamic area. Really interesting to have a look at it on Google Earth. You'll see it just looks like an artery or a set of kidneys draining to the ocean. You can see the channels that drain out each day. It performs all the functions of wetlands, particularly for us at Okarito. It absorbs the floodwaters. Okarito, we never have much of a problem with floods here because the water comes out of the rivers and spreads over that large area and then goes out to sea.
There's no way you could protect against something like that. You know, if you built a seawall, that sea would have just come right through it. But it's just the natural features of the landscape that absorb it. And that's why I think it's such a shame that there's so few wetlands, not just for the magnificence that they are and the life that they support, but how they support us in these times, and especially these times when we do have more severe weather events.
Now, the Ocarina Lagoon is a mataitai, which is an area for food gathering, a non-commercial area, which is a degree of protection which we needed really here. It joins on with the marine reserve to the south, the Waiho Marine Reserve. And for people living here, for me, as I've been here now for nearly 40 years, it's a source of employment, it's a source of food here. A lot of our food comes off this lagoon, and it's a source of recreation. And for some people in the village, it's a source of income. So it's a major feature of Okarito, including the forests around. Makawhio are the kaitiaki of the area, and they liaise very closely with it. If we had a problem, for example, if there was too much exploitation of one aspect of a fishery, we can have a local a ban on that for a while until that fishery is recovered. So it means, you know, local control of local resources, which everybody's very happy with here. The fact of giving people some local control over their fisheries means generally that the fisheries are much better managed.
There's not many wetlands left, so if people can take the time to just go and be near them and experience them, yeah, the bird life is phenomenal, but you've got to take a little bit of time to walk on a walkway through a wetland. You'll get a sense of it, but I think you've just got to just be with it for a little while and feel that ebb and flow of a wetland. Feel its heartbeat, yeah.
The glaciers came down here and dug out this lake, Lake Heron, and then deposited the moraine at the end, the band of country that encloses the lake. You can see that this land was deposited by a glacier. It's written in the land and you can still read it. There's lots of kettle holes, seepages and fens and marshes. Hakateri Conservation Park was being formed through the lands that were coming from tenure review. These two purchases, Flint Hills and Hakateri Station, they included going down into the wetlands, into the glacial floor.
It's quite huge, but I know that the small area, relatively small area from the Hakateri Clearwater Road across to the Ashburton River is about 3,000 hectares, which we are keeping tidy from weeds. I'm part of a team that works up in this area doing bird surveying, monitoring weeds growing in the area, and part of the Spider Lakes project, which is a partnership with DOC, having a major weeding project for wilding pine and broom. Quite a wide spectrum of birds are found here, like the crested grebe, scaup, swan and bittern, marsh crake.
We've been up here about 27 years and it's interesting to see the changes over time. There's one winter that we came over here and we'd had a horrendous amount of frost, and my husband and I came over here and in the back of the Mary Lakes here, it sounded like whales, and it was the ice cracking because the ice was so thick on the Mary Lakes, and you could just hear, and it was just that cooning noise of like whales, and that was amazing.
How do you keep warm in a climate like this, where there's frost and snow, where the lakes freeze over, where the winter goes so deep? These houses, pit houses, were built for warmth, and the key to it is ropo. Stalks are very light. You can wrap them up in big bundles and carry them around. They have incredible insulation qualities.
The top part, I believe, is the male, and this is the female part of the flower. The pollen was harvested and made into a flour and hence made into a bread. You know, that's yielding quite a lot of good food.
When these are cut and trimmed, then you get these wonderful bundles that you can put in and out according to what you need. On those huge journeys when they were collecting the tops of the mountains with karakia to a star, and then the source of the rivers, that's what Ao was doing as he went through all this mountain country. But as they travelled, they took their houses with them, and they took their ropo with them. So when they came to rivers, they used the ropo, all these bundles that are so easy to carry. Children could carry several, just strapped to them. They bound those together and made rafts for going over the rivers.
This place was called Wakanui. It's one of the very few places on the east coast where you can land at Waka with some comfort. Which then generates into the fact of why they were all here in the first place, why they pulled in here. And that's because of the Wakanui Lagoon and the abundance of mahanga kai, and also it's one of the biggest moa abattoirs ever found in the country.
1955, 1960, somewhere around about then. Basically the water disappeared when they had a big rain, and that annoyed one of the farmers, and so they filled it in, and that was probably the day before resource consents. People just did things and cut the water supply off. And then the flood relief scheme in Ashburton, that went in, and basically the water that used to come down here now flows out halfway up, just below Ashburton, flows out back into the Ashburton River again. So it would be nice to pick some of that water and put it back in here. It doesn't need a lot. But even though it looks quite good now, with some water back in the lagoon, it would be a totally different looking place. People say native trees take a long time to grow, but that's not true. Plant the right sort, they grow all right. You know, you use black Matapo instead of planting pines for shelter belts, and you know, the Matapos would grow in 18 months or so from a tree that high to a tree that high, you know, in the right conditions and in the right place. On a good day you see porpoises cruising around outside. Sometimes you'll see the odd whale. At times they'll come in and they'll play right on that drop on the surf, and they're just lolling along there with the flipper up in the air and rolling over. You can sit and watch them for ages, you know.
I've said to people when they come in here, I said, put your books away. I said, just look at the forest. Look at the species. Get to know the species. Talk to them. See what they're up to. It's the only living example we have of a forest type that grew on the Canterbury Plains for thousands of years. All the soil underneath is sediments, layer upon layer of old forest surfaces that were carved out of the Canterbury Plains by the Wetlands and other rivers coming out of the gorges. Totra and Matai, two big trees, they occupy the drier part and also quite fertile. Kakatea, or family, bless them, they didn't realise that Kakatea is one of the strongest root growers of all our native trees. You can't blow them over because the root systems go out for miles on some of the big Kakatea here. One of the largest ones that we got proves to be 550 years old, 550 growth rings. So you gradually evolve a management system, and you learn, not by going to books and trying to work out what the hell's going on here. You come and talk to the plants. They'll tell you.
Well, traditionally Christchurch was a wetland. Sewerage was going into our waterways and you would have typhoid, those sort of things happening. So there was a real need to put in a wastewater system. Since the last 150 years, we've actually drained a lot of that area, and what we have in the way of our rivers and wetlands that remain are very much a small part of what was there originally. Land drainage was undertaken by the Christchurch Drainage Board. In the early 90s, the Drainage Board became assimilated by the Christchurch City Council, which is quite unique for New Zealand.
There was a lot of restoration going on from around about 1990 onwards, about 30 years ago. I was involved with the City Council along with Ken Cooling and Dennis Preston in developing this wetland and detention pond area that you can see behind. It shows you a little bit of what it looks like after a quarter of a century of that vegetation developing. And it took over from earlier ideas, engineering ideas, to widen the rivers downstream to mitigate flooding, but rather to sort of create these detention basins up at the top of the catchments to hold that stormwater back, and also to be able to filter it before it goes into the waterways and into the receiving waters down in the estuary.
That particular area where the tributary runs is a beautiful spot for kai and for rako, for the healing medicines, really. So it was all set aside for farming, the Martians Road area, so that, you know, you could have the market gardens. So a lot of those places, which are swamps, were drained. Back in 2000, our auntie, Henny Phillips, she was approached by Christine Hedemeyer and people from the council about would there be any value in a site for a learning site for rongoa in the city. And I thought that she would say no, because the best spot for a ngahere is in the natural forests. She said anywhere is good for learning, and what better place than where our younger people can access that as part of their backyard.
She had a foresight of, if we look after the land will look after us. Before we planted it, they uplifted all these logs that went way back. So logs like tōtara, kahikatea, they were here. Yeah, they were here. So we're just, we're trying to make it beautiful again for the bird life, insects, and animals that live in the water. And so this place, Mahinga Kai, it is, to me, we're getting back to making it our food basket, our pātaka.
When you look back 150 years, most of Christchurch would have looked pretty similar to this. This site was about 2.5 hectares in size. The very first year we constructed this, it's just a low, flat, open area. We had pied stilts nesting in here, and they're one of our at-risk declining species in the country. So we had a threatened species come in straight away. We've had pukeko come in, and there's been no pukeko here for maybe 100 years. What we're trying to achieve across the city is a whole series of forest patches, ranging from areas the size of Rickon and Bush and bigger, so at least 7.5 hectares in size, at 5-kilometre centres across the city, right down to small patches like this, which is about 1.5 hectares of forest, to act as stepping stones for wildlife. And we're achieving that, pretty well for the big patches. We've already got Travis Wetland, Rickon and Bush, Sticks Mill Reserve, Boyd's Farm. Cranford Basin was acquired by council for stormwater purposes, and as part of that scheme we're looking to plant up to 35 hectares of kahikatea forest.
And we've got what we call an urban great walk now, right round Christchurch City, the Christchurch 360 Trail, as you traverse around the city. I think that there's a huge need for connectivity between people and nature, to understand not only the source of many of the problems that we're facing, but also to understand the natural processes and functions that need to be restored in order to kind of build a long-term sustainable planet.
That's a 11 to 12,000 kilometre flight, the longest flight known for any bird non-stop that doesn't feed on the way. Last week there were 1,578 godwits here, and now there's about 800. Quite a few of those have already departed. We may even in fact see some depart this evening. On the estuary here, we don't have very high predation, but the problem we do have is disturbance. If you go through the godwit flock, or you go between the godwits and the sea, or the godwits and the estuary waters, you scare them. And at this time of year, that's quite a big problem, because the birds expend lots of energy when they're disturbed. And that means they can't build up the fat reserves they need to migrate thousands of kilometres. Often, and we know that from the 80 birds banded here, not only do they come to the same estuary every year, but they feed in the same part of the estuary every year. Te Waihora Lake Ellesmere has the highest species list of any wetland or any site in New Zealand. The lake itself and Kaituiri Spit, which is the barrier between the lake and the ocean, have had more than 203 species recorded. No other site in New Zealand has ever had that many species of bird. This is an incredibly rare ecosystem. This is uncultivated land surface, which is super hard to find in the country. On the horizon over there is the mouth of the Ao River, and then beyond the horizon there is the mouth of the Hawesville River. And this is an expansive area of salt meadow flats, probably the largest expanse in New Zealand. It's basically mud and native marsh vegetation, very shallow water, an absolute incredible feeding ground and roosting area for thousands and thousands of migratory and native water birds.
It's a meeting point for a lot of our hapu too. Te Hurihuri from the north comes straight through the swamps to here. Ngāti Whiki comes straight through Gibby's Pass to here. Wairewa from that way, Kokararata even from their pa over in Port Levy, and then Taumutu from across the lake. So this is like the meeting point. What it was good for, of course, was tuna. Raupo was important. And ko ariari is the name of one of the food sources from the root of the raupo. There's koru, which is the product that's made from the tikaka, the cabbage tree, as well as waterfowl. You know, putakitaki, harira, all the type species of duck. They all would have been here on this lagoon. Our people gathered that food right through into the 1950s even, when there was still water here. To understand mana whenua, tangata whenua, you've got to see that. Because the world was way different. Water everywhere, harakeke everywhere, raupo everywhere, ducks everywhere, tuna everywhere. I mean, that's where our language and our world comes from. We want a future that has some of that in it. Mahi means work, mahinga means to work, and kai means food. So what it means is to work the food. Modern agriculture is just a different way to work food. Sheep and cows and whatever, goats. Whereas mahinga kai is more reliant on a wild food stock. There's no reason we couldn't have wekas cruising through farms, like the buff weka, the eastern buff weka that used to live on the Canterbury Plains here. There's no reason we couldn't have whitebait, real healthy stocks of whitebait running through drains and farms or waterways on farms, if we did our job better.
There's virtually no land. The land they farm right to the river's edge, where before there's quite a few kilometres back. It's come right in close, so I think that's the problem. I've seen that over my 62 years, I've seen it as they slowly take more and more land. And I think, well, this is not going to be good for the lake. And of course, the salmon doesn't run like it used to, because when I was a boy, that never stopped running. A lot of the weed was actually dying, and it started dying up this top end of the lake. They were trying to clean the weed out of the hawes well, and there was paraquat being dropped in the river, you see, so to get rid of the weed, so you got better drainage. And of course that eventually got out to the lake and started killing a lot of the weed out there. Once that big Waihenni wind come through, that just pushed that dead stuff up against the live stuff and pushed it right up. There was no fish in the lake for 5 years. It just killed the lake dead. It was like brown tea. The weed, it was rolling around in the bottom of the lake, but of course it couldn't get through that silty water, so it never got the lights, so it never regenerated, so it's never recovered.
It's probably the biggest coastal lake in New Zealand. It's a shadow of its former self. I mean, it's been drained, it's been polluted. The streams and rivers that are polluted from within the catchment, just feeding pollutants and toxins into the lake 24/7. When I was very young, and we would go out there and we would be fishing and swimming and larking about and having a good time, the water in the lake was not as polluted in those days. It was pretty safe to swim in it. I don't recall anybody getting sick. Sort of walked a lot of it, of the lake edge and lake shore, yeah. But not now, not at the age of 80. The Horomaka Kohanga area, it goes from there across to there. Wherever there's Naito lake bed within that area, that's captured by the Horomaka Kohanga. So that could be extended, give some protection to another area of the lake that's needs protection. It does demonstrate, if such a thing exists, rangatiratanga, tino rangatiratanga. Stand up and defend a place from abuse and overfishing and those sorts of things. So yes, it's working.
Wet focused the attention of the community, if you like, on the lake and the whole catchment of the lake, because it's, what's happening in the lake is the result of what's happening on the farms from here up to the Southern Alps. When it floods, you'll have a metre of water through here when it floods. And Wet had a whole range of people on. We had the fishermen on, we had recreationalists, we had people from all sorts of aspects, if you like, that were sitting around the table at Wet. Yesterday was a classic, because in the morning there was no wind, the lake was dead calm, blue, it was really picturesque. Middle of the afternoon we had a strong southerly come up, it was chopped up, there were white caps on the lake, and it just looked, all that sediment was being resuspended into the water column. So that you started to see the lake looking this dirty grey colour again.
There's 150 years of legacy here, and that's agricultural, but it's also urban as well in terms of what's been poured into the lake. There's been a lot of scientific study done to try and get baselines to understand more about, what your needs and to work with our community and a lot of passionate people around, improving the lake and working towards her well-being.
This is a tuna going down here, and on this side, he's weeping tears, ngā roimata, for the loss of what's disappeared from the swamp here. But on the other side, he's much more hopeful. And that's what the koru here are representing, the hope of the future. Down here we've got the kura and pakihi that are some of the things that we've lost, and matuku. So in here we've got the manaya, and he's peeking out from behind the harakeke, and of course there would have been a lot of harakeke here, especially along the wetter parts. And in here we've got the hand of man. And so the hand of man has done some really bad things here, but there's also the opportunity to fix that up. So that's what that's about. He was here in time for our first planting. the sentinel who exhorts us to look after the garden, the plants, for the future. And so he's a sort of a guardian of what we're doing here, but he's not only a guardian, he's telling us to get cracking and do it as well.
We got some money through the Rata Foundation and bought the traps and have placed them out around Yars Flat, and I have 3 wonderful volunteers who come out regularly checking them. And they're also down along the river. It's a really important area. We have Arctic waders that come here certain times a year to feed. We have our little ryebills and our little dotterels that live mainly on the braided rivers, but they come here to feed and fatten up for winter.
We've got our beautiful pea waka waka, the fantail, the insectivore that comes around. I've seen a few this morning, and their special sound is chip, 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 chip. Have a go at that one. Okay. So here at Yars Flat we have the Billion Trees program rolling out here, and Lincoln Primary have got involved with that through Living Waters.
It's not that hard. It's to work on whakawhanaungatanga, building that familial relationship.
And then we've got our beautiful kiriru. Koo, koo. Have a go at that. Koo, koo.
So the Canterbury Plains has only got 1% or less than 1% of native original forest remaining. So all our plants are sourced from seed that's been gathered from that 1% of original remnants. Our work is based on some research by Colin Merck, the ecologist. Every 2.5 kilometres we need a green dot of about 1,100 square metres, and then every 5 kilometres we need a larger green dot of about 6 hectares. So while a smaller green dot or even one tree is really valuable, the birds need like a larger area for territory and for breeding.
Eco-anxiety and climate anxiety, by working with other people on a project, slowly you can make a difference, but also being able to look ahead.
I think it's really important for young people to be getting involved because we are the generation now to actually start implementing these changes in the future.
So there's 80,000 aquatic plants here behind us. The plants can take up some heavy metals and nutrients as well. So that's the idea. So that by the end, where the island is, down the other end, and there's a big open bit of water, and that's hopefully the bit that's going to be the cleanest, of course. So we gather food or swim. There was a lot of resistance from people that ran the reserves here within Environment Canterbury, plus the surrounding landowners and leasees of the land. And that just took time to say, can we try this though, because you don't understand what we've lost as well. And so there's a lot of conversations because they were fearful that they were going to lose something, right? And I'll say, hey, we know all about that. So if we want to talk about loss, we can talk about loss, but I'd actually rather talk about what we can have in the future.
Ena kaora tenga here, kaora, kaora, kaora ngā manu. Mena kaora ngā manu, kaora, kaora, kaora ngā tanga. Ngata ngata ngā manu ngā here ngā rara ngā tuna ngā weka inanga ngā weta ngā whio ngā kua ko pupu matuku ko tuku puke ko katipo te raupo harake ke wharariki matipo. Te repo te repo mena kaora te ngahere kaora 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 ngā manu mena kaora ngā manu kaora 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 ngā tangata ngā tangata.
That'll be in June. The film will be shown at the Academy at the later part of June into July, around Matariki time. So that'll be good. Yeah. If you want other screenings in other areas and regions to conservation or educational, can you purchase the film?
Sure. Yeah, you can just request it online. Just email online, just look up online, and you can just request it, and you can screen it for groups, or in cinemas around the country. It is going to be screened at other film festivals. There's the Ocarina of Lagoon Film Festival, and that's spread in July. So there's other film festivals that can be screened.
So what's the name of the website to go and look online?
It's www.wetlandfilm.com. It was the beginning of the lockdown. That's when I started working on it. I started working on it with Philippe Gerbeau, who sort of
Round the corner?
He was organising the International Wetlands Convention, and he sort of was talking about something for that, and that's how we got it underway. But I have been involved with Te Waipora, with different facets of what's been happening out there. It's a long story, Te Waipora.
So, any more questions? I wanted to take this opportunity to also thank Kate Spencer, who has curated the visual art exhibition here for the last month and has done so for a number of years. And so we're very thankful to you. And all of the artists I see here, Jessica, who has contributed to the works. And so whilst we three stand here, there are many people who have been able to create the space for this learning and growing, and especially want to offer our gratitude to the Transitional Cathedral for their skill in helping us create what we wish to and providing this beautiful space to experience it in. So, Chris, thank you so very much.
And Richard.
Oh, it's Richard. Oh, I was thinking of Chris. So thank you, Richard. Awesome. Thank you. So we will be here again, I imagine, next year, potentially.
We don't know the date, which the date's different. Every year it changes because Easter's got a
Oh. Oh, I thought it was the front one. Oh, I thought it was alternate road.
Usually when I do here, there's gaps within the rows rather than the whole row street, but
Oh.
they might do it differently in different areas.
Yeah. Richard was saying, well, it's the COVID distancing. Oh, right. I didn't understand. I'll do the same. Yeah. Oh, that doesn't want to be moved because it's sewing on. Okay. Listen, honey, do you look like that? Okay. That might have to be it. Do you want out the door, Nicole? Yeah. Let me let you out so that we can get the... All right. Well, it's good to see everybody. Thank you. Thank you. And see you all.
Yeah, awesome playing.
Oh,
yeah. No, it was awesome. It was really
very hard to create a loop of it. The vocals happening, and that was amazing.
I think I'm also looping. And you guys occasionally picking up each other.
Yeah, I would have
It was really cool. It sounded really amazing. I really reckon you guys would do
I love that, that one line in the up there. Oh, you're right. Yeah, that was super fun.
Yeah. That was really too powerful.
Wow, awesome. It felt good to do. It felt good to do. Anyway. Thank you, everybody. Just going to let Nicole out so that she doesn't have to carry a cello all the way around.
Yeah. Thank you. Cellos are too big to carry around. You should play the double bass or something. We'll do the piano. I'll do the piano tomorrow. You don't want to do it tonight, do you?
No, well, Chris mentioned leave it really put the topping on.
Yeah.
Then he was going to take that tomorrow.
Yeah. The two of us will do it tomorrow. So you've got to move all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Pick up the
Bring it out.
You did say you don't do it tonight, you do it tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah. But everything else is pretty much as it was today. You've got to get ready for it.
Bye, Peter. See you.
Only Saturday tomorrow.
Let me help you out. Thank you, guys.
Hey, Lisa. I've no idea, sorry. Do you need me to do anything